Libongwe igama lamakhosikazi. Long live the spirit of Umama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Long live the spirit of Helen Joseph. Long live the spirit of Rahima Mawusa. Long live the spirit of Helen Joseph. Welcome to it and happy Women's Month. As you all know, this August we are commemorating the 70th anniversary since the march in 1956. But this is the Empowerment Zone with myself, Queen the Empowerer, your favorite podcast where we discuss all sorts of socio-economic issues. And if you're joining us for the first time, in this very platform, we amplify the voices of change makers, community organizers, humanitarians, activists, and people who just want to see the world change for the better. And we are inviting you to journey with us as we tackle the topic of GBV today. As mentioned that we are tackling the topic of GBV, I would like for us to take a moment of silence in honoring the lives of Uinene Broechana, also Karabo Mukwena, Tsahofatso Pule, and many other women who have become the sacrificial lamb and have lost their lives due to GBV. Thank you for that moment. And with that said, I am not alone. And in the studio today, I have a GBV activist, a woman who is multifaceted and wears so many hats, who is a change maker and very famous for mobilizing. And she goes by the name of Mandisa Khanyile. And I would like to hand over to her just to introduce herself. But before we get to that, I just want to thank her for gracing us with her presence today. Hi, Mandisa.
Hi, Queen.
How are you? Mandisa, you're such a mobilizer. Eh? You know you've mobilized me before. You're the ultimate mobilizer, you know?
Look, when I'm really passionate about a cause, and gender-based violence is very close to my heart. So I don't even see it as mobilizing others. I just see it as bringing attention to the issue and making sure that also people show up for themselves.
Oh, nice.
I think as women, specifically in this country, there's so much. As the empowerer, we are disempowered in so many ways that when we have these platforms where we can engage and speak in our own voices and not have people speak for us, it can only empower us. So it's really important. So I wouldn't call myself a mobilizer. I encourage people to empower themselves.
Well, I'm just calling you that because when we were actually discussing having somebody to come through for this episode, like everybody just said Mandisa. We did not even have to go and look for different types of people or just have a debate. No, I think this one will work. Everybody just unanimously said, I think Mandisa is a great person. And that's why I'm thank you so much that you honored the invite. But going back to the mobilize, I think you did mobilize me. So for the mere fact that you mobilized me, you are a mobilizer, right? But how are you feeling? I mean, Happy Women's Month?
August is always exhausting. It's exhausting for many reasons. For many reasons. Women's Month in November are always exhausting for anyone who's a GBV activist, obviously, because a lot of attention gets brought to women and women's rights issues during this month, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing because they're doing it for rubber stamping reasons. They're not doing it because they care, but they're doing it because it's Women's Month and it politically makes sense for them, right? Similarly, in November during 16 Days of Activism, same story. So there's a lot of engagements that are happening in the course of this month. We'll discuss that obviously during this interview. But Women's Month for any GBV activist, you'll always see us with bags under our eyes this month. Yes.
And I can tell that once we start talking about GBV, you are ready to roll, right? And I love it for us because in this platform, our audience is always just looking for, whether it's basic information, whether it's information that needs to be reiterated, they just want to be informed, because like I mentioned when we were just having coffee, that we are also trying to inspire people to make changes in their daily lives. But I think myself and the entire crew knows who you are. I just want somebody who's sitting at home just to get to know who is Mandisa Khanyile.
Mandisa Khanyile is a GBV activist, originally born in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, mother of one 16-year-old boy. And
what's his name? Let's just give him a shout out.
His name is Manelisi. Oh God, he's going to be so excited.
Manelisi, you need to subscribe to this channel. Hi, Manelisi.
So yeah, who am I? I tend to let passion run my life. I used to work in corporate once upon a time, telecoms, if you'll actually believe it.
I do actually.
And I left that work to start my own Facebook. I used to have my own Facebook. It was called .afro. It was specifically because Facebook banned me so many times over the men are trash issue, which we'll discuss.
Yeah.
That I was like, you know what? I have a couple of friends that are developers. Let's see what we can do about this. And so we developed .afro, and it was an Afrocentric social media platform. And I quit my job to go and focus on that.
I love it. I love it.
It bombed. Yeah. It bombed eventually. So then when it bombed, just to go into the journey, when it bombed in round about to end 2017, it started to die down. And I was like, oh, what do I do next? And at the time, a group of us as radical feminists on Facebook were running a campaign, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, called Men Are Trash.
Yeah.
And that particular group of activist women were called to action by Ulolo in January of 2018 to say, look, Women's Month is coming up in August. Why don't we start Women's Month by shutting down the country for gender-based violence and femicide? And so whilst .afro was bombing, I was like, well, I've got nothing to do.
What?
Whilst .afro was bombing.
.afro.
Yeah. Whilst it was bombing, I was like, oh, I've got nothing to do and I really care about this issue. So I threw myself into it along with a couple of other women and gender non-conforming people, and we set up the national team for the Total Shutdown. The original plan was that we were only supposed to march to 3 places, which is obviously Parliament in Cape Town, the Supreme Court of Appeals in Free State, and the union buildings in Pretoria. However, as we were mobilizing, because every single weekend we would go into communities and ask women what they want to come out of this process, we found that everybody wanted, in the different provinces even, to go and address their issues. So we went from 3 march sites to 36 march sites very quickly, where people wanted to have their own demands that they wanted to bring into from their own communities. Having said that, we spent the 8 months mobilizing around this issue, and mid that period, we were contacted by the Call to Action Collective, to help. Because they were civil society organizations working on gender-based violence and femicide, and they had been wanting to do a similar type of shutdown since the death of Karabo Mokoena the previous year. So we met up with them, we started organizing, mobilizing unions, etc. And of course, the hashtag I Will March With You began. And that was women telling their GBV stories to say this is the reason why they're marching today, because they were molested as a child, because their former partner was abusive, and this all happened on the Facebook group for the Total Shutdown, which grew from just the 10 of us to over 100,000 women from around the country that had committed to themselves that they are taking the 1st of August off and they are going to help us shut down the country.
So, Mandisa, I love that you are mentioning a tool that I feel is very pivotal for our generation, which is social media, especially when you mentioned something around you just wanted to go to 3 places, and then other people were felt like, we also want to be a part of this, and we saw how you eventually became inclusive through using social media, right? But there is a generation that did not use social media to mobilize, and it is the generation of 1956, where they marched to the union buildings as we are commemorating 70 years this year. I just want you to just take us through the role that they played, because I feel like it's a baton pass, right? We have the 9th of August, which we are commemorating, right? But we also have the 1st of August that you keep talking about, which is also a very great milestone. So can we just talk about these dates separately, starting with honoring, of course, the women who marched to the union buildings, and then we come into the total shutdown?
Of course. Look, imagine the bravery of having to defy the apartheid government, whilst most of them were domestic workers, teachers, nurses. I mean, at the time, the journey even around women's rights globally was still something that, everybody was coming to terms with. Women's rights to vote, women's rights, so many things. And so for them in that moment, under apartheid, to have that level of bravery to say, we're not going to tolerate this, I think was a fantastic moment. And I'm so glad that it gets the recognition on a year-to-year basis. I mean, Mama Winnie is one of my heroes, for example, and many women of that generation. And I just admire their courage and their sacrifices. And I want to acknowledge that we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't had it not been for them. So absolutely, the 9th of August is really, really important. I do feel, though, that it has been tokenized, that we're not really using that day to honor the journey of women's rights in South Africa, but rather using it as a day to have a government event and how many,
like one of those days.
One of those days where they make us empty promises that they never deliver on. So I wish that we had really stuck to telling up our gains on that day. What do I mean by that? For example, we, under economic empowerment, which I know is one of the key themes of this podcast, women were supposed to be getting 50% of all of the tenders that were issued out in the country. This was a promise that has been made repeatedly because we're more than 50% of the population. It makes sense. Still to this day, so why are we not, for example, tracking those kind of things and saying this is where we are with this, and demanding on a year-to-year basis that, no, you made this promise. How far are you with this promise? And who do we hold to account for you not meeting this promise?
That is so true. And I think that's why we ended up having the likes of Total Shutdown, which got the country to the state of emergency for GBV. But, I think you are the perfect person to tell us about that particular movement.
Okay, so Total Shutdown did not ask for a state of emergency for GBV. That was Women for Change.
Oh yes, that was Women for Change.
So in terms of Total Shutdown, which was on the 1st of August, we came up with 24 demands, because at the time in 2018, it was 24 years since the dawn of democracy in 1994. So we came up with 24 demands to say, for these 24 years, we have not enjoyed our right to safety as the women of this country. So these are some of the demands that we're making. Demands such as an automated registry for protection orders, funding the shelter system, ensuring that we have Tutuzela care centers in all the communities that require them, etc., etc. Having a 365-day campaign for gender-based violence and femicide. I'm mentioning but a few. Well, our primary demand was that we wanted to have a gender summit. And the reason why we wanted this gender summit is because we knew what the government was going to do. They were going to receive our memorandum and chuck it in the bin. And so those 24 demands were time-bound, and we wanted to have some kind of an accountability mechanism to make sure that they were met. And so the first demand was that we wanted to have a gender summit. It was actually meant to happen in that month of August.
Not particularly on the 1st?
No, it was just in end of August. That was the original deadline, but it was moved to the 1st and 2nd of November in 2018. We then had a pre-summit as civil society organizations, so that we would go to that gender summit speaking in one voice. That was successful. We had our summit on the 1st and 2nd of November, which resulted in the summit declaration. Now, that is the founding document of what is currently the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. So we won that fight. And so in 2019, when we were still in the drafting phases of this National Strategic Plan, we had the death of Uyinene Mrhodjana take place. And that was during the time of the World Economic Forum. It's called a summit, right? Yeah. And so we were like, okay, the country is now building back momentum. And the thing is that as much as we're still drafting a plan, there are no funds that have been allocated to the cause of gender-based violence and femicide. So we had said, look, government isn't the only player here. We also have private business. So we then decided that we're going to shut down Sandton. We shut down the country, but we're like, where is the key? It is Sandton.
Speaking of the Sandton March, right, I find it super, super interesting because one of the things with regards to GBV particularly that I'm interested in is that what are we doing wrong as a country? You know, in 2026 that we have such high statistics of people affected by GBV. And I love the fact that you are mentioning the private sector. So what are we doing wrong as a government, as individuals at home, people who are watching the Empowerment Zone right now, and of course the private sector, which I don't feel like has much traction. And that's why I'm very excited for you to take us through that journey.
Sure. I mean, the private sector, even something as simple as taking seriously sexual harassment, which is something that obviously happens specifically in that space, are doing very little, if anything. They're doing very little around awareness. They're doing very little around the contribution towards funding the fight against GBV. But also they make it an issue that's basically a thing that should be left at home and not something that actually needs to be addressed even in the workplace. So you will arrive with your shades and your blue eye at work. Is your employer going to ask you what happened?
No.
Are they going to help you seek psychosocial support services?
Yeah, they are looking for sales.
Exactly.
They say it's a numbers game.
Are they going to even give you sick leave?
No.
These are some of the things that just shows that they see it as an external issue and not something that they have to address when we are actually in a GBV crisis as a country. Now, to go back to the Sandton shutdown in particular, the ask, because as I said, we're struggling with getting funds from the government, and we're like, no, let's go to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. The demand was we wanted a 2% levy on all profits, right, from all JSE listed entities to contribute to a GBV response fund. Now, the vision of this GBV response fund is that it was meant to be led by the GBV Council. And this will be important for the not fit for purpose conversation later. But essentially what the GBV Council is supposed to look like, you know how SANEC basically manages the entire response for HIV for the country. So private sector puts money in there, government puts money in there, development partners, USAID, the works. We wanted to have a similar structure for GBVF, which it would be the overarching mechanism. And that's where we wanted them to contribute. So anyway, we march there, we make that demand. They say that they'll think about it.
Don't tell me they're still thinking.
No, I'll tell you what happened. So they all said that they said that they're going to think about it. And at the same time, government then decided to have a joint sitting that announced the Emergency Response Action Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, where funds were taken from the Kara Fund to then create some kind of a mechanism to start funding GBV organizations through the NPA. Now, at this particular point in time, the private sector said, so that these people don't march to us again and give us problems, let's set up a private sector fund, which currently exists, which is the GBV Response Fund. And that was always meant to be a temporary mechanism in the build to the fund that we wanted, right? It's no longer temporary. It's no longer temporary. And that's, again, one of the things that we're fighting for under the Not Fit for Purpose campaign, is that we want the fund that we wanted. We want the council that has the teeth and the accountability mechanisms to not just run that fund, but also hold all the departments that are meant to be doing things around GBV to account, e.g. Department of Justice, Police, social development, health, etc. We need a coordinated response for GBV and not just leaving it out there, but to actually say, listen, Department of Health, you have left your Tutuzela care centers underfunded because you've made it a Department of Justice issue. So that level of coordination
is wonderful.
That was what
because they are interconnected, you know. And I think let's jump into the Not Fit for Purpose because you mentioned it quite a lot in this conversation particularly. What is this movement about, or this campaign rather?
So we, in this 8-year-long journey that we've been with governments, have been on and off in terms of collaboration, sometimes Sometimes they hold our hands, sometimes they fire us out of the room, etc. But in all of that, we've been consistent that those 24 demands in 2018 that translated into a national strategic plan for gender-based violence, we want that thing funded and we want the implementation to be honored. It has not been. They keep deviating at every point in time. So one of the things that they did is that they came up with this GBV council legislation that basically took away all of the teeth that council was supposed to have. So it's now become basically an advisory board. It went from being the overarching mechanism for coordination to being just an advisory board.
Imagine.
And so this is why we say that legislation is not fit for purpose. And there have been NSPs for GBV before, but they've failed because they don't have the right coordination, leadership, and accountability mechanisms. So we're saying bring those things back into this legislation, and then we will accept the council. So the council that was announced on the 1st of August by our President Cyril Ramaphosa is not the council that we want. And that is why we are taking the South African government to court this month under the Not Fit for Purpose campaign so that they can correct that. Because we're not going to say we wasted the past 8 years to get a council that is basically an advisory body that can't do anything.
Oh, this makes so much sense. And with this conversation, we've mentioned like the private sector with the Total Shutdown in Sandton. And we've also mentioned, all the government departments that need to be held accountable. Another conversation that I'm interested is with those with individuals, somebody who's watching at home. Because in order to fight GBV, everybody needs to be an active participant. And some of the stereotypes are around words that are used. For instance, the word imbogoto. Do you think that's an appropriate word that we can still use in 2026? If yes, why? If no, why not?
Absolutely not. Women are not rocks. Women are not rocks. And this thing
for those who don't know what imbogoto is, it's a rock.
So this thing where we must be resilient and we must basically keep it in the whole begezelaring situation, that's where the whole Mbogoto narrative comes from, is that we need to be able to stomach whatever
Nonsense.
Challenges and that life throws at us, and that's unfair, right? Going back to what the private individual can do. And I'm just going to go back to one of the things that we used to do as an organization. So I used to run an organization called Rise Up Against Gender-Based Violence. And we used to basically run the only evacuation service for GBV survivors.
I did say she's multifaceted, by the way.
And so what that entailed is that you would send us a WhatsApp and say, I'm in immediate danger. My partner's trying to kill me. We would then mobilize security services.
I did say she's a mobilizer, by the way.
We'd then engage them, and we would literally come and physically remove you from your home and take you to a place of safety. Now, having said that, the fact that people needed to call an organization and couldn't call their friends, their family, their neighbors is telling. It says that people were hearing those screams, people were hearing those noises,
but they were not doing anything
and they're
about
not
it.
doing anything. I can tell you of many examples where I've gone just to a friend of mine to go to a braai, and I start hearing people beating each other in their homes. And no one in the complex does anything, and I'm literally there banging on the door saying, do you need help, and how can I help you? And it's something that simple where you could actually prevent a femicide if you just take action. No one is saying, be a vigilante SAPS person yourself. However, there's nothing wrong with just dialing the police when you're hearing a disturbance. Not just that. Also, this thing of, for example, that you have an abusive uncle or you have an abusive auntie, etc. And everybody knows that at Christmas, these two are going to be screaming at each other, then they'll be slapping one another. And it gets kept within the family. We need to end that. We need communities that are responsible, and we need behavioral change within our communities where this behavior is not acceptable. If we start inculcating that culture, similarly to how we have this culture of in a taxi rank, if someone steals from you, people are like, Mbambeni, and they run after you and they actually apprehend. We need to have a similar culture when it comes to gender-based violence and femicide, and have a no-tolerance situation. Because if we continue to enable perpetrators and continue to hide perpetrators and continue to let them feel welcome in our communities, we're never going to change. We're never going to change the issue of gender-based violence.
Absolutely, Mandisa. And speaking of behavioral change, it is like these connotations around Nimbogoto. And with Imbogoto, I'm a little bit on the fence where that is concerned, because I don't think the genesis of Imbokodo was around women like taking in all sorts of bad things that people don't want to take accountability for. I think there's an original meaning to it, which is not so bad, but we'll probably discuss it some other time. For the sake of time, I also want us to discuss the word feminism, right? Because I've been called out. Queen, you don't have to call yourself a feminist. Do you know what that word means? And I was called out by somebody who I can have as a guest here and asked to empower other people. So if that person is already confused as to what that word actually means, I really got frightened as to what is it that we aren't doing correctly as people who understand what that actual word means. Can you maybe break it down for us as to what does being a feminist or feminism mean? Because it's always associated with, people who are misandrist. It's always associated with people who, I don't know, who are bougie for some odd reason. So just take us through.
I hate the term misandry because I think it's dreams. I think it's literally dreams. It's people. Where have women had the power to be misandrist? Remember that the issue.
I think you need to say that again. Like I felt that 7 times. I think it's the culture of just naming things, right? But in true essence, like where are the facts?
When have we ever had the power to actually? Imagine how awesome it would. Oh, okay. It would be if we could do misandry. Like, we could oppress men.
Just this once. This once.
No, of course, no one wants to oppress men. But the point that I'm making is people need to understand that patriarchy is an issue of power and power over, right? And all feminism is fighting is for equal rights.
Just equal rights.
To be recognized as humans. To say that women have a right to exist. I don't understand
we are
why
not
that...
second-class citizens.
Thank you. So I don't understand how that could be offensive to anyone.
But it is. And it's a thing.
It's a thing because some of us, for example, I'm mentioning myself.
Yeah.
I mean, when the Men Are Trash hashtag was trending.
And I loved that hashtag. I really do. It's 2018, right?
This is 2017. It was around the death of Karabo Mokoena.
Oh, yeah.
When it was trending, we were called into so many radio stations and television stations to explain ourselves because how dare we? And I'm like, the fact that you're so offended by a hashtag, no one has died because of Men Are Trash. No one has been stabbed. We have women dropping like flies in this country. We're the rape capital of the world. And everyone is so up in arms over a hashtag saying Men Are Trash.
Imagine.
And having said that, even if we are hurting your feelings, right? Acknowledged. The purpose of that hashtag was to show people that we need to take collective accountability for the things that we are doing as men and boys. We cannot now sit in a braai with our brother that we know is beating his wife and not call him out on it. That is what that was. It was asking for accountability. It was asking for collective responsibility and saying, how do we change this so that men aren't trash anymore? And the way that was taken as a misandry thing and that we are basically calling for the death of men, you should have seen the kind of Facebook posts people were making. This is now a trigger warning, by the way. I remember... there was this gentleman who's friends with Rutendo Benson. I'm sure you know him, right? By the way, he's a chauvinist pig. And I'm saying this because I've said it to his face, so I don't mind. But one of his friends came onto my Facebook and said, people like us, feminists, are corrupting the women of this country.
Yeah.
Because...
basically, that's what was being said to me when they called me out. Yeah.
They said we're corrupting this women of this country because we can't be like those good girls. Because all of us are basically sluts. Because
how dare you?
How dare we? Because we're also talking about sexual liberation and at that time. And I mean, for example, my genesis in activism is trying to get the decriminalization of sex work. So they used all of that as ammunition to say, no, I basically want all of the women in this country to be prostitutes. And this is why I'm pushing this agenda.
Oh, my word.
By the way, that's a bad word. We use sex work and not prostitutes. But the point that I'm making is This narrative that feminism is something bad is literally created by the patriarchy in order for us not to fight for the right to be equals. So I don't entertain it, and it's never going to be a bad word. I'll always identify as a Black radical feminist till the day that I die. I encourage all young women to do the same, because why shouldn't you be proud to be a human and treated as an equal? Why should you be ashamed for fighting for the justice that you so rightfully deserve?
Why should you be ashamed? Speaking of that, we are still in Women's Month. In actual fact, the 9th of August is next week, because we are shooting
on Sunday.
Yeah, on the 6th of August. What are some of your plans around the 9th of August, or how's your calendar looking like? Because at the beginning of the conversation, it's just like, August is exhausting. And it's an answer I was not expecting. I'm like, how ironic for a GBV activist. But it also equally makes sense, because I think you are highly booked this month. So how are you spending the 9th of August? Where will you be? The rest of the days in August, do you have things that you can invite us to? Perhaps maybe somebody who's at home. I know even the past weekend you held a dialogue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So on the 1st of August, we did have the National Dialogue for GBV. We were talking what happens in 2030 when our National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide comes to an end, and what are the next steps that we're going to take whilst we're litigating against the council. One of the things is that we're doing this month is that we're actually filing for the court case against the GBV Council. So we are mobilizing around that. We will announce a date for the court filing through the Not Fit for Purpose social media pages on Tuesday morning. So please, as many people who are available to come to that as would be great. It's going to be at the Pretoria High Court. Okay. Please bring your trash bags, because we are we're having a protest saying how this legislation is trash. Yeah. So please bring your trash bags. Please bring your black t-shirts. We're going to be foot soldiers and ensuring that we don't have this thing pass in our names, which is going to be a toothless structure. That's one of the things. At the moment, Civil Society National Dialogue Caucus, which I co-coordinate with Anzio Jacobs, we are running dialogues around the country.
We had Angel come through for the July a Mandela theme show. And it's so great to know that you also work with him as well.
Yes, we are both co-conveners of the Civil Society National Dialogue Caucus. And what that caucus is doing is essentially, with the National Dialogue, there is the state who's running a process, and there's also, it's meant to actually be led by civil society and ordinary citizens. The National Dialogue is such an important process, and I'm so scared that the rest of the country doesn't realize what a huge moment this is.
Yeah, and I think this is where I just want you to elaborate on what this National Dialogue is. I am quite particularly interested in women's issues, what's being discussed there. But just for somebody who's watching at home, who's always heard there's a National Dialogue and they don't know what it is, how can they be involved? Because if it's a national dialogue, it means ordinary people like myself need to be a part of it. But if we are clueless as to what's happening, then it becomes one of it's us and them thing. So just take us through what the National Dialogue is and what are some of the women issues that are being discussed there.
Okay. So do you remember CODESA? That is the closest thing I can give to what a national dialogue is. South Africa is the first country to host a national dialogue whilst not at war. A national dialogue is meant to be a tool to it's a peacemaking tool in a conflict. So the way that South Africa is currently going, it looks like we might be headed towards a civil war. So this is meant to be an intervention to actually stop that from happening. One, national dialogues are incredibly powerful tools, to the point that other national dialogues, for example, get to decide whether or not we move from a dictatorship to a democracy. They can change a constitution. They can take away a constitution. All of the things that we have gained, we could lose through a national dialogue, and we could also have more gains. For example, if the country decides that they wanted a death penalty back, they could get that through the
national dialogue.
Okay. So it is a very important process. But because of one, some of the misinformation that happened in the beginning around a fake 700 million that doesn't exist, and people just thought that this was another tool for corruption and haven't really owned it as the democratic process that it is. This thing is the equivalent to voting. It is that important.
Especially since it's voting, it's election year this
Yeah,
year.
and so even when we vote in representatives, right? So we'll vote in a political party or an individual to speak on our behalf. The national dialogue says no one is speaking on your behalf. Queen, what do you think about access to water? What do you think about access to GBV services? How do you think the country can improve? And then at the end of this process, which is going to be around about November next year, once we have dialogue the entire country, we are then going to come up with a new national compact, which is going to be the founding document of South Africa. Similarly to how, similar to the CODESA agreements, etc. That is going to build whatever legislation we're going to come out of, etc. So that is the thinking behind this process.
Okay.
Look, there are people who want to dumb it down and dilute it and not let it have the power that it's supposed to have. And that's why I believe at the moment there are political actors that don't want this thing to take place. But ideally, this should be citizen-led. The national dialogue only requires a meeting of 20 people and above, and for it to be documented and placed onto the National Dialogue app. So you and your Stokvel can sit in your corner, have a conversation that relates to your community, and it can be documented on the National Dialogue app to contribute to the next social compact.
Oh, wow.
So that's really powerful.
I love how well you were explaining it when you're even taking it down as a Stokvel, because my next questions would have been centered around, okay, where does this national dialogue take place? How do I become a part of it? How am I, as a street vendor, or somebody who's working at ShopRite, Mr. Price, who works long hours, comes back home and doesn't have much time or even have the resources to know what is really going on? Where do these conversations happen? What's the process like? Do I then today as Queen go and WhatsApp my girl, open a WhatsApp group and say, okay, let's have our own national dialogue, and then I'm submitting it to Mandisa and Mandisa is submitting it to whoever? What's the process like?
Okay, so essentially, there's going to be different types of dialoguing that's going to take place. One, there's going to be the ward-based dialogue. That's the one that's run by the state. So NEDLAC has money that is going to be used to have 13,500 ward-based dialogues. That's meant to be 3 in every ward. And those are going to be basically championed by your local councillor, etc., most likely going to be discussing the issues of your particular community. Those are the state-funded ones.
Okay.
The rest of the dialogues are not state-funded, right? So this would be Queen and her Stokvel deciding that they're going to host their own national dialogue, or an organization, say, for example, a Sonke Gender Justice decides that they're going to host a community dialogue. That they run independently. All they need to do is that they need to submit it into the national dialogue platform using the standardized form, and then that data is going to be aggregated next year so that it contributes towards the social compact.
There's a website that people go into and it gives us the standards that we need to comply by.
Absolutely.
And then we just have our dialogues and we submit them there.
Absolutely.
I think you need to direct that to that camera because it's very important information. Just please repeat that for us.
So you just go and you document your dialogue on www.nationaldialogue.co.za. And basically you'll be run through what the form is supposed to do. You'll be run through what a facilitator is supposed to do in that environment. We obviously want environments that are safe for people to speak, etc., etc. So all of those resources and materials are available on the National Dialogue website. You can go onto it and you can dialogue at any point in time. Currently, though, we are in the pilot phase of the dialogue. So we're still testing the dialogue mechanisms. The full rollout of the National Dialogue will be launched from next year, January, by Dialogue Day. I'm very excited about Dialogue Day. So sorry, I do need to speak about it. It's going to be the first time that children can engage in a democratic process.
Oh, wow.
We are going to be dialoguing every single child in the country on the same day in January of next year. And we're talking from grade 1 to matric. Because at the end of the day, we keep making decisions on behalf of the people who need to live those consequences. So they are actually going to get to say, this is what the future they want needs to look like. So that's the relaunch of the National Dialogue through Dialogue Day next year. And then after that, we are hoping to have at least 100,000 dialogues in communities hosted by civil society organizations and ordinary citizens. So every church should have a dialogue. Every Stockfeld should have a dialogue. Every taxi rank should have a dialogue. This is why we engaged the different sectors to say, everyone in their corner should be encouraging people to dialogue.
Have a dialogue.
Yes.
Because you just excited me. I'm also a founder of 2 groups. One is Prayer Queens, which is a spiritual group. And then there's I'm a Queen, where it's just women in different fields, whether you're in business, where you're in film and television, which is my background, where we just gather together. Sometimes we go hiking. Sometimes we do all sorts of things. So I'm like, this is an opportunity for us to actually start the dialogue and actually submit it there. But you had me when you said, you are also involving children.
Yep.
Because I'm also a mother of a 9-year-old who's very feisty. The other day I got a call when I was at work and she was at school, and a particular organization was addressing them around the Constitution and all of that. And so it so happened that it was a colleague that was facilitating that conversation, right? And apparently she raised her hand. At that time, she was in grade 1. She's in grade 4 now. And she was like, but if you want to have an effective dialogue, you cannot have grade 1s, grade 2, grade 3, up to grade 7, and addressing all of us at the same time.
You need
to be specific. So it goes to show that we sometimes underestimate how children can think. And the colleague actually called me and was like, Queen, your daughter just called us out. Who is this? And I was like, I'm at work. I did not influence nobody, So I am really, really excited, especially as a single mom, to know that you are going to be, unleashing the voices of children, and wow, I really look forward to the dialogue. But just before we close, because we are really running out of time, just let's make this the last one. What are some of the women topics that the National Dialogue has had on record, or the common topics that you keep finding? I know GBV is one of them, but what are some of the things?
So there's 3 sectors that are represented that speak to women's issues within the National Dialogue. It's the sex work sector, it's the GBV sector, and it's the women's sector. So
what do you mean women's?
So women have this separate sector to GBV.
Oh, okay.
And a separate sector to sex work. Initially, they were meant to be one sector falling under women, but they said women are not generic. So we don't want to be talking about, for example, access to economic empowerment whilst talking about the shelter system. It doesn't make sense. So they separated themselves into 3. So each of those sectors are going to be hosting 5 dialogues during this trial period under different thematic areas. So the sex work sector, for example, would be talking about sex work in prisons. They are going to be talking about LGBTQ sex workers. They're going to be talking, obviously, about the decriminalization of sex work and. The women's sector are going to be talking about economic empowerment. They're going to be talking about access to sexual reproductive health services and. Similarly, and the GBV sector, as you know, has already had their first dialogue, which was talking about the journey of what is going to happen with the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide post-2030. So it's those thematic areas at the moment that are coming out. But another thing that we need to be very wary of, when we have a national dialogue, we can't preempt what people are going to be discussing. People are going to be discussing the issues that affect them in their communities. So all we can do is ask the questions, and the answers and the solutions are going to be coming from the communities themselves.
No, it makes sense, because then if that's the case, we might as well just be the people who are, facilitating the national dialogue might as well just come up with, okay, this is what we're going to be talking about. But actually we want the people to be the ones that actually say, you guys are actually looking at shelter? No, actually, water is our priority issue, type of a thing. So with that said, because we are coming to the end of the show, what words of wisdom can you share with women out there? I know you've shared so many calls to actions just through you sharing your journey of how you came into activism, some of the projects and campaigns you were a part of, indirectly or directly, you have called us into action. So just for now, for the audience, can you just quickly just share words of wisdom, but also share where they can follow you on social media or follow the organizations that you represent, so that they can keep in touch with you. But also, we do have a tradition here at the Empowerment Zone. Because we discuss very, very heavy topics, we always like to end with a game at the end. So I just want you to give you that. We're going to have a minute game towards the end. But for now, you can just share your words of wisdom, share the social media handles, then we're going to get to the game.
I don't have words of wisdom. I believe women are wise enough. And I think that they need to share their voices and actually give their wisdom. So that's my 2 cents for Women's Month. Where you can find Call to Action is on calltoaction.org. Where you can find Not Fit for Purpose is notfitforpurpose.co.za. Double check, sorry. I think I might be giving the wrong handle here.
Okay.
But you can find on all socials Not Fit for Purpose as Not Fit for Purpose or Not Fit for Purpose ZA. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok, Facebook, etc., and on LinkedIn. Similarly, with Call to Action as well. We have a very active YouTube channel where we've had so many activities over the past couple of weeks that are documented, that can explain the journey a lot better than I can, around what are we doing, why are we taking the South African government to court, what exactly are the different key things that we are unhappy about in the legislation and in the Council Act. So that's really important, and follow them on all of their social media pages, please.
Sabawell being eyewitness when you take the government to court, but it is what it is. You heard it, beautiful ladies. Happy Women's Month. Mandisa says she's not going to share words of wisdom because women are wise enough already. Okay, now we can get into the game because we are trying to unwind, right? So the game is quite simple. The first word that just comes into your mind, you just answer. Don't overthink, because I have a lot of activism. They're explaining that happens in this couch. Just choose one, hey? Just choose one. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Okay, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Okay, interesting. Hip hop or jazz?
Jazz.
And then indoors or outdoors?
Outdoors.
I knew. Dichilo that immobilizer Lucisi. Dichilo, one pikisa. And then save the water crisis or electricity crisis. Aha, this one always gets everybody messed up.
Hey, water crisis, of course, because yes, power is important, right? However, we can't survive without water. And we're in a water scarce country. So definitely for me, the water crisis is really important. Don't get me evangelizing around water.
Oh, trust me, we wouldn't mind. That's why we asked you to come here. And this is the moment where we say thank you so much, Mandisa Khanyile. Yo, this felt like a lecture. It felt like a girls' chat. It was so insightful. It was so awakening. It was so thought-provoking as well. I have no words, but just to say thank you so much. And also shout out to all the wonderful work that you are doing and to you as an individual. And I love the switch. I love the switch of behind the scenes. Hi, Queen, texting me, come through and do this. And then when you get into professional spaces, you become this beast that you are. I love it for you, Sisi. And Nkosi Kakhulu, thank you so much for coming through. And also a huge thank you to everybody who's been supporting the Empowerment Zone. We see you. We see those likes. We see those engagements. When Mandisa mentioned that actually we want to hear your voices, I think Mandisa needs to go to the Empowerment Zone page and actually see what you guys are doing there. You guys are engaging and we love it for the show. But also it's just a reminder, the subscription is free. Just click that subscription button, continue to comment. And of course, everything that you are mentioning, we do take into consideration, and we hope in future we infuse it for the show. But for me and the ever awesome and incredible team at the Empowerment Zone, we are saying Adios. The Queen is signing out. Bye.